Welcome to episode 16 of Improvisationally Speaking. Our guest today is the producing artistic director of the State Theater of Georgia, the Springer Opera House. His name is Paul Pierce, and Paul and his theater have a special place in my history, in my heart, in that I met my wife in 2006 doing a show with the Springer Opera House, Guys and Dolls. But Paul has been the producing artistic director there for the last more than 2 decades, and during his time there, audiences have tripled, and the Springer has instituted programs that are now very popular, like Springer Theatricals and the Springer Theater Academy, which is a very successful program for children. In addition to being a veteran stage director, he's a playwright, he's an actor, and he's a musician. Paul is the former Associate Artistic Director of the Repertory Theater of America, the former Artistic Director of the Harbor Playhouse in Corpus Christi, Texas, and the former Managing Director of the Wayside Theater in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. Paul is someone I respect, and I consider him a friend. His story to me is inspirational. From the Improv Alive Studios in Seattle, Washington, I am Julian Schrenzel, and you're listening to Improvisationally Speaking. Paul Pierce, welcome to Improvisationally Speaking.
So glad to be with you here, Julia.
Wonderful to see you again. You are the artistic director of the Springer Opera House, the State Theater of Georgia in Columbus, Georgia.
That's correct.
Your career has spanned through many different artistic organizations, a number of theaters starting in Corpus Christi in Texas. Is that right?
That's right. Really started, my first job out of college was with the Repertory Theater of America, which had a rehearsal and booking operation in Rockport, Texas, which was near Corpus Christi. And so I started there as a touring actor, and ultimately became a company manager, a booking manager, and finally I started getting directing assignments. And ultimately I became the director of another theater in Corpus Christi called the Harbor Playhouse, which is not a touring company. It was a long-time production company that had been there for some time, and it was right on the bayfront there in beautiful Corpus Christi, Texas. And that was the first theater I had on my own.
No kidding. When was that?
I became the director of the Harbor Playhouse in 1984.
Gotcha. So have you ever held a job that was not within the arts community?
Oh, sure. I actually came to the theater rather late in my life. There was no theater in my high school. I did not really see my first play until I was a freshman in college at the University of Georgia. And it was kind of an accident. I mean, it wasn't totally, when I was in high school, the closest I ever got to being in a play was, skits and things that were done. And a bunch of rambunctious people got together and decided to put something on for the rest of the school. It was, sort of organized or semi-organized foolishness is about as close as I could get to that. And so I had sort of been on stage. There was a time right after I got out of high school, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. And I ended up talking to a priest in my parish who, I sort of unburdened my soul and told him I was lost and didn't know what to do. And he said, "You're floundering. And I just need you to know that there's a lot of people your age that feel like they're floundering. It's not anything unusual." And he said, "I don't know what you're going to do in life, Paul, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to have something to do with the stage." And I said, "What do you mean the stage?" He says, performing, entertaining, acting. And I remember saying, "That's a job? You can get paid for that?" And he said, "Yeah." So he was really the first one that put the thought in my mind. And then when I was at Georgia, and my main interests there at the University of Georgia were girls and beer, and so there was a girl, of course, it always starts with a girl in my math class, who said, "I've got a friend in a play. Do you want to go with me to see it?" And I said, "Sure." And so I went and I saw what I later learned was really a student production of a children's theater version of the Uncle Remus stories, Remus Tales. And it was the first time in my life, honestly, I'd ever seen a group of people that were clearly very organized. They had costumes, they spoke their lines, there was lighting changes, there was props, and I was absolutely enchanted. And I sat there for the first time in my life and I said, I could do that. And I declared myself a drama major. And that was really the beginning of my career. But before that, I'd grown up, my family had a grocery business, and so I worked in the grocery business, working in produce, and I cut meat in the meat market, and cleaned up and bagged groceries, and worked as a cashier and all of that. When I was still in high school, I worked on a framing crew for building houses. I worked in a furniture factory, building furniture in the mill room, and a little bit of everything. I worked at a fried chicken joint and all of that. So I was, I drove a truck. My family also had a relationship with, we were kind of in the lumber building material business. So whenever I was out of work, I could go to some lumber yard and work. And I did that and drove a truck and a forklift. And, I was used to working as a young man. So theater and all the long hours and all of that really didn't bother me at all. It wasn't a surprise to me. I thought that was what going to work was like. And so obviously a lot of those skills came together in theater because I found that I was useful in the scene shop. I wasn't afraid to learn about electrics and really everything that had to do with theater in my early years. I wanted to learn about it. Sound, lighting, costumes, acting, directing, anything.
Yeah.
And so that's what.
Something really interesting about your role that is not very common in the world of art is that you run a theater in the middle of the Deep South. And I would think, and I'm not going to stereotype or anything, but I would think that there is a challenge here up in Seattle where I am. The arts are very, to as much as you can, they are in our country. The arts are supported. And there's a lot of support and backing behind the arts, and especially most anywhere else in the world, that's the case. But I would think, would it be safe to think that your job down there has some complicated aspects, or is any more difficult in that you have to run that extra mile or push that much harder to keep a sense of legitimacy or purpose within the community, larger community of your existence? You have to verify and show your worth more amongst people like that?
Well, I've done theater all over the country, and of course my touring years, the first 7 years of my career was touring, and I saw a lot of different communities. And the one thing I took away from that, Julian, was that audiences were pretty much the same everywhere. And my job is a storyteller. And, this is what human beings have been doing since the early days where we stood up and walked on two legs. We are storytellers. Uh, it's it's a reminder every day. Work in this very beautiful, elaborate, very formal theater building. It's 148 years old, and it's quite gorgeous. But there's nothing that I do here that doesn't remind me of the very, very earliest forms of storytelling. I can see a group of people sitting around a fire in a cave with these shadows dancing on the wall behind us, and somebody is telling the story about what happened on the hunt that day. And that there was a saber-toothed tiger that jumped out and tried to jump on this little small guy, Ugga, let's call him. And he's one of the tribe, and his life was in danger. And someone took a spear and threw it at the saber-toothed tiger and killed it. And they brought it back. They brought the skin of the tiger back to the cave, and they told the rest of the tribe what had happened, and told the story of the tiger that jumped out and almost killed our young friend here, and everybody cheered, and they were so touched by the story, and people were crying, and then there's the skin lying on the floor of the cave, and someone picks up the skin and puts it on and starts creeping around the cave and playing the tiger, and everybody's frightened and screams, and the storyteller says, "Stop! No! It's just me." And they all laugh and go on, and they tell the story, and the next night, someone says, "Tell the story again," and they tell the story again, and they act it out, and then the whole tribe takes part, and it's a ritual where we show up and we lay a gift down at the feet of the actors, the willing suspension of disbelief. We lay this gift down, and the auditorium comes alive, and the shadows are dancing on the wall, and there's magic in the room, and then the story is told over and over, and a generation later, the original storytellers are dead, but the tribe still remembers the story, and somebody picks up the skin and puts it on. Somebody picks up the spear and pretends to be the tiger, and they act out the hunt one more time, and pretty soon, that tribe, their identity is tied to that story. They are the tribe of Ugg, Og, Wugga Wugga, and the saber-toothed tiger. That's who they are.
Yeah.
And years later, centuries later, the story is being told, and we begin to understand why storytelling is as much a part of who we are as human beings as anything we eat, drink, or say. And I think of my job very much in that way, as a storyteller.
Yeah.
And if I can make the shadows dance on the wall, if I can bring a surprise and thrill and questions about life into the audience's mind with whatever play we're doing, that's my job. And I found that mostly audiences are the same everywhere. They want to be enchanted. They want to be taken away. And I don't particularly think a whole lot about their cultural proclivities or the fact that they're in some rather remote corner of the South.
Right. The geography dictates what these people are, right? It's not that.
Yeah. I mean, it's true that there is a, pardon me, a kind of what you might regard as a conservatism. There's certain things that they really mostly don't want to hear down here. They don't want to hear the Lord's name taken in vain. Mm-hmm. No, they don't want to hear a word that reminds them of a bodily function. Okay. But other than that, I think it's pretty wide open.
I think you as a theater leader, I mean, your idea and concept and fascination and of story and connection to story is so obvious by the fact that you do stories on stage. That's what a theater does. It's portraying stories on stage to audiences. But this exact power of the story, I would think that, I mean, your work is not, you're not, I mean, you do go on stage a lot, but as a head of an organization in the world that's doing business and has to meet a budgetary needs and everything, you are every bit a business, just like Microsoft might be a business or any other business might be a business, but your sense of story is so advanced and so exciting and so infectious that it's the kind of thing that a lot of companies talk about. They always talk about, yeah, we need story and we need to have a narrative, a common narrative, so we can have our common goals. And yet it's so evasive to a lot of organizations and a lot of leaders out there. Why do you think, I mean, obviously coming from an acting background, I can see why that is so ingrained in you, but what do you find as far as the practical application of that importance of the concept of story when you apply that strictly in a business sense, putting the artistry of it aside, if you will? Do you see some really concrete, exciting manifestations of your approach in using story just from that business standpoint?
Yes, I do. And it has to do, it starts with company values. You know, there's a lot of companies that will create a value statement and hang it on the wall. But does that value statement reflect the way everyone in the company works? Does that value statement reflect the true, innate, inherent values of the human beings that work there and deliver the services? And that's where to me, that's my secret weapon. You know, we work in an industry in theater that in a lot of places in the world, mostly in the Western world, we're not thought of very well. If you speak of an opera singer, if you said, I'm an opera singer, people would say, oh my goodness, that takes discipline, that takes commitment, that takes devotion, unbelievable work, endless hours of singing scales and who knows what. That's discipline. That is a high art form. If you were to say, I'm a ballet dancer, they would say, oh my goodness, the discipline, the work, the suffering, the hours, endless devotion and commitment to the work and study and hours at the bar and all of that. That's discipline. But if you say, I'm an actor, there are a lot of people that say, hide the virgins in the silverware. There's an actor here, you know? And one of my goals in my career, Julian, is to reverse that. If I want people who encounter me and everyone here in my company to think of us as not just disciplined, not just dedicated, but I want them to think of us as generous. I want them to think of us as servants to the community. And service is written in everything we do. I sometimes, and other people have picked it up and carried it on, we are the house of yes. And regarding the relationship to improv, that's where improv lives. We are the house of yes. It's so easy, particularly for someone like me that's been running this theater for 30 years now, for people to come in and propose things to me which immediately sound like a lot of work. Oh, I would like for you to bring a group over to my organization and do whatever it is. And there's something that involves me organizing something and taking it somewhere, or some service is to be provided. And of course, my first thought is, oh my gosh, we've got the schedule we're on. It's already tight. Everyone here is already overworked. This is the last thing I need in my life. And I don't know what I would say to my employees if I had to take this proposal to them and say, hey, guess what? I signed up for one more thing. What I have found over time is the more I'm able to say yes, the more good things happen to my company. And I am looking for a way to say yes. I'm not looking for a way to set something aside, because when I say yes, when we say yes, we often find ourselves in the midst of a lot of people who don't know anything about us. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, in fact, most people in the world, really don't understand the work that it takes to put on a play. Their thought is, oh, they love to be on stage, and some people, I wonder sometimes whether they even know we memorize lines. Do they think that we're just making this stuff up whatever it is? But I get a lot of hints sometimes that people don't really know what it takes to put on a play. So people will call me and say things like, my mother is having a birthday party next Sunday. Could you bring a group over and do some entertainment? We don't need it to be very long, maybe just 30 or 40 minutes. And they don't understand really what they're asking. And I try to, of course, explain it. But guess what? When we can say yes, and I'm not telling you that we say yes to birthday parties, but we can say yes to some kind of community involvement that takes us outside of our regular comfort zone, good things usually happen to our company. We try to think in terms of what can we do? What can we do? What's possible? And because here I am, I'm almost 65 years old. I've been doing this in some form or another since 1977. Most people in our industry think of an artistic director as someone who has a lifespan with a theater for maybe 10 years. 10 years is kind of it. And I can understand that. You run out of ideas, you run out of energy, you feel like I've used every trick in my bag, and the only thing I can do from here on out is to repeat the old tricks. And what I've learned, and I think it's given me longevity, is reinvention. I'm ready for people to walk in my door and propose a new way of doing things or a new way of thinking. And usually they're young people, and oftentimes they're not, what they're proposing isn't what an old man like me would consider realistic. But I have found that if I listen and if I'm able to say yes, then transformation occurs, and I've got often another 100,000 miles on my tires, and so reinvention, rediscovery, and making that a company value too. I've found it's not just good for me in my career, but it's good for the community. Because inside a theater, people look at a theater from the outside and they think, oh, that's where they put on plays. And they don't necessarily think that is a dynamic ball of creativity that's going on inside of there. And there's pushing and pulling, and there's struggles, and there's passion. They're just thinking of the play. But as a storyteller, I want people to look at my theater and see it bursting at the seams with creativity and new ideas, big ideas. And if that can happen, I'm performing a service for the community. I'm promoting the notion of creativity, and I think instilling in them the values of what a creative economy looks like. We had this global economic meltdown in 2008, and a lot of companies went out of business, and a lot of companies that survived restructured, and often with a smaller workforce. And what I've seen is that the companies that survived, that got through that and restructured with a smaller workforce, are now often more dynamic and more valuable than they were before, because they brought on board two qualities that I find absolutely essential in running a company: innovation and collaboration. Innovation and collaboration. And if my workforce is not thinking so much about what is my job description, but how can we innovate and collaborate that makes what we do or what we build more valuable. And if you think about innovation and collaboration, that's something that an individual employee can contribute. They're not waiting for the boss to tell them what the next thing is. They're able to step forward with their fellow employees and with management and say, hey, I got an idea. Listen up. This may sound crazy, but listen up. And if there's enough of that going on inside of a company, then dynamism and, I believe, value is created when it did not exist before.
And therein lies the trick to getting that thing, that mission statement on the wall, to be part of your company identity, self-identity, isn't it?
I think it's yes. I think the mission statement and a vision statement is valuable, but I would also say company values. What is it when you encounter an employee for your company? When someone encounters an employee for your company, what is it they want? What is it you want them to experience? And for my company, it's kindness. I want them to, whether you're in the box office or front of house, or you're selling concessions, or somebody's calling you on the phone to get you to renew your season tickets, whatever it is, I want you to walk away from that encounter and say, they were so kind, they were so helpful. And if you do that, then the way we work with each other inside the company, kindness. The Dalai Lama says, be kind whenever possible. And then he says, it's always possible. And so if we do that, yes, we're all devoted, we're all working hard, we're all probably overworking. Who knows what your state of mind is at any given time during the day. But if we greet our fellow employees and our customers with kindness, good things will always happen.
That's terrific, Paul. Your positivity, just your outlook, the positive and a willingness to look at something completely fresh is what makes a difference with your organization. I've seen that forever, and I see that especially right now. I want to ask you one more question, and the question is, what legacy would you like to leave here on this earth for your having made your mark? What is that?
Well, I genuinely feel, of course, in sort of the small circle of my career, I want the audience to be bigger than when I started. That's first. When they drop me in the earth, I want the audience to be bigger so that at least people could say, there's more people that want it today than there was before. Because I do think that what I do and what we do is a noble enterprise. It's an ancient art form that has strengthened the bonds of society for thousands of years. And while I do try to run this place like a business, I'm aware that we're much closer to being a church or synagogue or a mosque than we are a local department store. We have a mission in society that makes humanity better. And that part of it I'm absolutely dedicated to. As far as legacy, I would only tell if I could speak to my successor, I would tell him or her that it will feel overwhelming for a while, because what we've built here is not just a theater, it's a big idea. And that big idea can be overwhelming sometimes. If you say yes as a reflex, your life gets more complex, okay? And the organization gets more complex. So I'm aware that my successor will walk into probably one of the most complex $2.5 million businesses maybe on the face of the earth. I don't know. But what I would say is, think about everything that's going on in the building. It's easy to be in my office here and not encounter people in the box office, in the scene shop, in other departments around the building. But I need to be thinking about them all the time. I've got to get up and go down and talk to them and ask them how they're doing. Is there anything I can do to help them? Because they're working in little areas of the operation, and they can often feel forgotten, particularly with long hours. But you got to do it. You might wake up and say, gosh, I wish I worked for a simpler, more straightforward organization. I wish I could just sell tickets and do plays. Do we always have to be saving children in Title I schools? Do we always have to be going out to the youth prison and working with those prisoners out there? Do we always have to be reaching out to work with at-risk kids in after-school programs? why don't we just do plays and sell the damn tickets? You know? And my answer to that is, you can do that, but your life will not be nearly as meaningful. You know, I attended I don't know how far you want to go with this, but I attended a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce a few years ago, and a very successful businessman that everybody admires got up in front of the group and he said, why do we go into business? Let's hear it. Why do we go into business? And people started shouting, make a profit, make a profit, I'm going to make a profit. And he stopped and he said, really? That's why you went into business? To make a profit? I'll argue with you. I think you did not go into business to make a profit. I think you first thought you wanted to do something good for your family. Then you thought, I want to do something good for my neighbors. Then I want to do something good for my community. And finally, you said, I want to leave something behind that reflects my values and who I was. And that's why you get out of bed every morning. You don't get out of bed every morning to make a profit. Of course, you've got to make a profit to exist, but you're trying to leave something behind that's enduring. And that's really, really what a business is. It's not just put capital in one side of the box and profit comes out the other side. Inside that box is a human being. And the chances are that that human being is a creative human being. Capital goes in, creativity occurs, and then profit comes out the other side. And that's the kind of legacy I'd like to leave, not just in my theater, but in the business world.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. I'm glad to visit with you.
Thanks for joining us this week on Improvisationally Speaking. Next week, I have a very special guest for you. She was the co-host of the national morning news show The Takeaway from Public Radio International and WNYC, TEDx speaker, and author of a book called We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. Celeste Headley is our guest next week. Thanks for joining us. This is Julian Schrenzel. You're listening to Improvisationally Speaking. See you next week.